All right, so first things first, since we're going to be swapping out the actual internal cam, is we're going to have to take the lifters and line them up. So it's turned here, so I'm not going to from it to end. You have to make sure they stay in that order, because as I pointed out in the original video, the grooves will match up to what's in here. So keep that in mind. So take them all out one by one. All right, so now that we have the lifters out, let's take out the back cover here, and it's just 3 bolts. We'll put this out because we are going to be resealing this with a new gasket. All right, so the cover's off. That's the back of the camshaft there. Luckily, they used, I forgot what this is called, the material for an actual gasket material. So this pulls right off, similar to the first video where I was pulling the gasket. Really convenient. I bought the cork one. I'm still debating, since I'm not going to do it until tomorrow completely, but we'll see which one I use here. It's really a simple repair, but just wanted to show how easily it came off. And here's the cover. Pretty much it. Just catches the oil from the rear. Okay, so now let's pull the front off, see where we go from there. All right, so now we got to remove. I removed the whole thing instead of messing with that, since I'll be replacing it, and we'll be taking off this nut right here to be able to pull all this and access the actual camshaft. So that's the next step there. All right, so once the screw is removed, you might, now I got lucky because I recently did this job seal, so that came out quite easily, but they don't always do that, so you want to be really careful. You might be able to tell that there's a little bit of chipping away there. That might have been one of the times I tried taking it off and had some problems, but good time to inspect it. I'm going to clean that up. This guy's not so old, so I'll be reusing it. But if you get down to this level and you realize that that's worn out past the little plastic tab there, you probably want to remove that, replace it. Anyways, so all that does is expose the bolt, which we'll now be removing. So let me get my impact wrench. All right, so as you can see here, I've braced it with looks like a 12-inch adjustable wrench here, and I'm using, of course, the ground to help me with the leverage. So let's get this guy out. And there you go. So let's start removing the actual cam gear. It's not that deep, but as you can tell, it sits on the woodruff key, so this does sit only about 1/4 of an inch on top. Keep that in mind. And there we go. Now, remember, like I said, I've already done this job, so this came out quite easily when I did the seal, or I should say the reseal. But just keep that in mind. It's going to be a little bit more to work with. As you can tell, the woodruff key just fell out. Now this guy's in good shape, but this is the reason why I am replacing it. Let's kind of zoom in here. Can you guys see the damage on that bad boy? And I will show you in a minute. You know, let's just walk over and I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. Now that is damage from, I believe, the balance shaft belt being too loose, so it plays with it too much. Now let's take a look at what a healthy one actually looks like. Notice that. So that's another reason. While it's moving around, and since I'm going to be doing the upgrade with the 4-degree offset key, I want to make sure that that's exactly where it needs to be, and no extra play is there. All right, so I pulled the cover off, And it'll fight you a little bit because that O-ring has to clear. Once that's off, it's time to take the camshaft. All right, so removing of the actual camshaft. Now, this is a tricky thing here. As you can see, it's got a lot of weird dimensions on it. To remove it, it's not just a pull. You actually have to turn it. So I'm gonna kind of show a little bit. You can tell by my hand what it takes to actually get the device, the camshaft out. All right, so see, I have to turn it there. There we go. And then I have to turn it back. Now it's stuck there, so now I tilt it just slightly to clear. And there you go, camshaft removal. So I'm gonna install the other one. I don't think I'm gonna have to show that. All right, so now you have to torque this down because we installed the gasket to 8 Newton meters. So here is the torque wrench I like to use when it's anything less than 10, and it's tension based. So that's Newton meters there, and I need to get it to 8. The way it works is pretty simple. Is you turn this guy, and I've already gotten it all to 4 until it hits the 8. So I'm gonna go around here little by little, and I went to 4, now I'm gonna be going to 6, and then to 8. So just wanted to show everybody how that works. All right, so let's talk 4-degree offset key. Is because I am going to be installing, instead of this woodruff key, which sits right there on that notch, I am going to be installing a 4-degree offset key. Now I'm going to post a link as to where to get this, and also understand that if you do, you will need to file this down to fit. Okay, so even though it says it's machined and it's a direct fit, it is not. You will have to file it down, so make sure you invest in a nice little file to be able to do that. So why? And why not? So first things first, let's talk about advancing your timing. Now, what I did here is, of course, that's our standard timing mark, but for the purpose of this video, I am going to be using this as the reference mark. So let's just assume that this notch up here, where the blue is pointing, that's where top TDC is for the camshaft. So once everything's aligned, that's where you would do it. Now notice the position of the cam gear. Okay. Well, when you install the key, it sits inside the woodruff key hole, and then either pushes the gear back or forward, depending on where you're going to put it. And ever so slightly, this is 4 degrees. You can get 2 degrees, or you can actually get one that you can rotate yourself if you're comfortable with doing the angles. But for right now, and this is what I think is going to get a lot of people held up on if they do get this. So if you advance your timing, what you're doing is you're allowing the intake valves to open ever so slightly before the TDC or the actual timing mark is supposed to be. Because they open up slightly faster, then there's a little bit more air flowing in, and so you build up slightly more compression. Because of that, the torque range of your vehicle drops in RPMs. Now what that means is now whatever power band you were supposed to be at, let's say at 2,000 RPMs, you're now going to have it probably closer to 1,500. The exact math I'm not sure of. Bottom line is, when you advance the timing, your RPM range drops. The downside to that is, because of the capacity of the engine, of course, they're going to be closing earlier too. then that means once you start hitting above like 4,800 RPMs, you're not going to have the same power that you did before. Now, city driving, of course, you're probably not going to feel it. That's why it's a great option for a car that you're driving around in the city, maybe even somewhat on the freeway. It's great because you're probably going to stay under 4,500 RPMs as you're driving. So that's why I purchased this key, and I'm going to be advancing my timing. So let's talk about doing that. Now, and this is where I want to explain, because there's a confusion that this is what you're advancing. So in other words, let's say that's a timing mark, and you know, we move it here. You know, you're thinking, oh, okay, so I just advanced the timing, the camshaft, if you're going to bring it over a few teeth. But this is the actual camshaft. The relative position is what matters to this, not where the teeth sit. So when you install the woodruff key, if you were to install it going forward, sorry about that. So in other words, if this is going to sit in the slot and that part is going to be forward, then this will shift forward. Okay? But if you install it going backwards, then of course that's going to be in there. So now it'll sit behind it. That's what you want. And I'm going to show that example right now. So that notch is the camshaft. That notch is the actual gear. And this, of course, we're acting like this is cam gear. So if I install it this way, which is the way I'm going to be doing it, then the camshaft will be slightly forward. All right. So again, if the woodruff key were to sit in this manner, notice the alignment marks. Notice this is still within timing, okay, because we're acting like this is our notch. So that's the actual timing gear placement. But notice the camshaft, it's forward. That is advancing it. And see, I think that some people, if they install this and they do it the opposite way, they'll assume that since this pushes the timing sprocket or the timing gear forward, that they're advancing the timing, but it really isn't the case, because now, oh, sorry about that, because now, as you can tell, the relative position of the cam is behind it. So you want this gear to be behind that so that the actual camshaft is pointing forward. So the correct position, if you're going to advance it, which I am, would be this way. Because now, again, that's the cam being forward. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to delve too much more into it because otherwise it'll confuse you. But again, the correct position for this 4-degree offset is this. Now, let's also talk why you shouldn't do it. All right, so, oh yeah, the man, the myth, the legend. Yep. Anyways, so a couple of things when I said a minute ago when you shouldn't do this upgrade. Now, I wasn't trying to scare anyone off, but the reason why I said, let's look at some of the reasons you shouldn't do it. Well, quite frankly, if you're not comfortable doing timing, like if you're still hung up on, is this too tight? Is this wrapping around the way it's supposed to? And you're not comfortable doing it, I would suggest waiting before doing this upgrade. As simple and as easy as this upgrade is, I would wait. Oh, and also, if you're not comfortable the way your 944 is driving right now, for instance, there's something questionable, maybe low oil pressure, you hear some rattling, I wouldn't make any mods, because that way you can troubleshoot everything without having to worry about, is this what's causing it? And if you go into the forums, you're gonna find yourself with a lot of people asking questions. They make a small change to the vehicle and then they blame that change for everything that's going wrong. Now, it could be, however, that's why you really need to know your vehicle. You really need to know what you're doing so that you don't find yourself, you know, I'm just going to disassemble everything and, you know, take that off and now it's going to be driving okay. That might be the case. However, it could just be that while you were disassembling everything, and again, this is where you really need to know your vehicle, you could have nicked a vacuum line. You could have not tightened up the gas lines when you were taking off the camshaft. Something could have fallen inside and you didn't clean everything correctly. So really know your vehicle before you really do some hands-on with this mod. It's a great add-on for 944 NA. So I definitely recommend doing that, but just, I've said it before, research. Lastly, I don't want to discourage anyone from doing it as well. I just want to warn you, not really warn you, just encourage you, but at the same time, proceed with caution. This is going to wake your car up, along with the throttle response cam. It's going to wake it up. So you're going to be driving slightly more aggressive to enjoy it. It's your vehicle. If you want to do that, have at it. I'm just letting you know. Please proceed with caution when you guys an idea of what it takes to get this woodruff key in shape. See that guy? And I'm taking a file to it and just digging into it. Now I'm just doing it lightly here, but by doing that, and you'll see on the link that I provide that this guy was squared off completely, I'm able to get it in a more, get it in a more rounded shape. And it takes some time. You got to thin it out just slightly there. So I think I've invested about 45 minutes into it and just about have it done. All right, so when you're putting the gasket on, make sure you pay attention to the direction of the gasket. See that top? So this guy will be sitting facing up. You can also see that the back part is a little bit more, has no logo, no writing on it. So we're going to be going logo writing up. All right, with the gasket held in place by a little bit of a couple of dabs of oil, and the lifters as well, you want to get a good angle. Start bringing it. All right, so as you can tell, I am putting the cam back on, the cam tower, and this is actually pretty difficult to do on your own. In the past, what I've done is I've actually tilted the vehicle, so I only raised it on this side to give me a little bit more of a flat angle, but I found that then the lifters tend to fall. Now, of course, if you have a, like I mentioned, the cardboard, that's great for putting it back on, but now you have the gasket to contend with, as you saw earlier. So if you can get some help, that would probably be the best bet. And all you really need to do is position this while somebody puts a bolt in the back. Don't attempt to do these guys, of course. Right now I have 3 bolts back here, and now that it's resting on them, I'll start putting them in place. Another thing to make sure that you're doing correctly is you have to make sure that this camshaft, that your camshaft is right around timing. I kind of marked the notch where it was supposed to be, so I'm comfortable that's going to be in line. So again, normally when you're putting the tower back on, you would make sure that this is at TDC before you put the tower on. Okay, so remember that portion of it. All right, offset key is installed. Cam tower is in place. So let's install the cam gear. All right, so you're probably gonna hear my grandson yelling in the background, but regardless, I've already assembled the majority of the camshaft. I wanted to point out all the markings that I have mean something to me. Like that was telling me that that's where the top of the offset key was. Of course, I always like to make sure, mark my timing. For here, that tells me the position. I make sure that I have one on bottom, one on top. Now the bottom one is gonna line up with this guy. Obviously I can't see that, so I always make sure I put one on top as well. So by placing this guy and aligning it with the top, I'm able to come over here and I don't have to guess where it goes. So that's why you see all those markings there. The majority of the time they last there. So it makes sense to me. So if it works, do it. As you can tell, somebody else looking at this is gonna be like, what the hell happened here? All right, so once you've got all the bolts in place and it's been torqued down to 15 foot-pounds, all you need now is the covers for the tower, and don't forget your little washer that sits right there. And these are actually going to be put to 5 foot-pounds on here. Honestly, it just needs to be snug, and you should be fine. All right, so hopefully this comes out okay. My neighbors decided to start doing the lawn here, so we're going to be sealing the injectors. So there's an O-ring here, and then there's the cap, the O-ring, and then this little plastic spacer. So sometimes when you pull it out, you see that? I was able to just kind of pop that last part off. So luckily when you pull it off the fuel rail, it loosens the cap, which is really cool because you don't really want to mess with it. And that's pretty much it. All right, so now that you have that off, you grab your kit. And they'll vary. As you can tell, the other one had brown O-rings as well. This one has the black one, so you put one O-ring on bottom there, and they're identical. Then you put the plastic spacer that it came with. There we go. And then you put O-ring. And then your cap. And it has, I don't know if you'll be able to see this quite well, but see the groove there? The cap will lock inside of that. So you pretty much just put it on and be very careful. Do not touch the nozzle at the top. And it's just kind of twisted with a little bit of force until it snaps. Well, again, my neighbors are mowing the lawn, so hopefully you were able to hear that. But that's pretty much it. Once it snaps in place, that's the correct height. And once we install it in the fuel rail will add whatever added pressure that it's going to need. That's pretty much it. That's how you seal these bad boys. All right, so normally I would do them in sequence, but of course this one's the one that's more visible. And again, you can see the ridge that falls upon in. So the injector slides into place. And since it's a new O-ring, yeah, it's gonna fight you. And just take your time. And then, as I showed in the other video, this ridge here needs to line up with, or sorry, this groove here needs to line up with the ridge of the fuel rail so that the clip can pinch it, or excuse me, can sit inside that groove, but the opening here goes on the ridge to keep it in place. And we'll spin it around to make sure. And hopefully you can see that the ridge there is in place. And so is the injector. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing is to clip this in place. I'll do that once the fuel rail is in place. I just kind of wanted to show everyone how that works. And the only other pressure is going to be once we lock the fuel rail in place, it's kept together by those 4 bolts and then gives the added pressure to the O-rings that are sealing the injectors. All right, so I'm gonna do the remaining 4. All right, so let's install the fuel rail now that all the injectors, as you can tell, have been installed as well. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I put some paper to hold it in place. Excuse me, I put some paper there so that nothing would get inside the injector holes inside the intake manifold. It's kind of hard to see, but what you're doing is you're just lining up the caps. What you're looking for is you see that gap right there and also that gap right there. So once you're about quarter of an inch, maybe half an inch, that means the fuel rail is sitting nicely where it's supposed to be. The last part of it is pretty much just because it's new O-rings, so the O-rings are going to get compressed. So now we can install the 4 bolts and tighten this guy down. All right, now that the fuel rail is back on, all we need to do is put all the clips, and these guys just snap into place. And of course, make sure we run the vacuum lines through here. So I'm gonna put that all together really quick. Or actually, you know what? Let's see if we can hold this in place while I'm doing the rest here. And there you go. Cam tower, except for the part that has to do with the timing, is completely installed, along with the 4-degree offset key. The fuel rail, the injectors were sealed. That's the end of the project, folks. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe in a week I'll do an actual driving test, as I'm still working on the radiator. As you can tell, I did another complete flush, and I decided, since I was down here, to replace the hoses, and you'll be seeing a video as I'm doing also the radiator mounts. All right, so the cam tower is installed, and I had probably closed out the video, but I wanted to go over a couple of quick things. I already talked about the importance of having the right tools. I explained a little bit about if you're going to be doing the 4-degree offset key, know your vehicle. But I wanted to talk about something else, and I haven't really recorded myself on the videos, and I usually do it. I felt victim to it because I didn't do it, because I was so busy recording and trying to get the right steps that I actually missed one. And it's actually about, before you take the part off, take the new part that came in and compare it visually to make sure it's the right piece. And even after you remove it, make sure that you compare both of them side by side to see if there's any variances. Sometimes it's an improvement. Sometimes you realize they sent you the wrong part. Case in point, today I showed how to seal the injectors, and I was having a hard time. And it's not on the video because I want to just kind of do a recap, but it's not on the video. But I had some problems with it, setting in correctly. So I actually took it out, pulled one of the injectors, and compared the old seals to it. And I noticed that the new seal, the little plastic spacer, the O-rings were fine, but the plastic spacers that came in were just a little bit wider. I measured them, and I was sitting a little bit close to 2 millimeters thicker. So I went, and of course I didn't throw any of my old parts away, and I put the old washers back on. It's really the O-wings that you have to worry about, but I put the old washers back on, resealed all the injectors, and set it in place, and it fit like a glove. So I haven't been showing that, but compare the parts before you take them off, especially if it's your primary vehicle, because if it's down, you're gonna have to wait for the part to come in. But even afterwards, make sure you verify that they look the same as you're disassembling them, and also keep them, together so you can compare how the old ones came out and how the new ones will come back in. So keep that in mind. And once again, hey, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully these videos are helpful to everyone. And as usual, keep it simple. Keep these guys on the road. Have a great one.